So today's daf yomi is Kesubos Tzadi Test Kesubos 99. So we're going to start on the bottom of Tzadi Chesem Abayz, where the Gemara is discussing the following question, where if a person had said sell, points an agent, he says sell for me a lesach, and he goes ahead and sells a he says sell for me a lesach, he sells a core. He told him to sell a lesach is half of a core, so he told him to sell half a field, and he sold the whole field. So what's going to be the halacha? Is there the violation of the shlichus, which is called mavir al shlichuso, violation of the agency, in which case it's disqualified, or is the mosif al shlichuso, just a continuation of the shlichus, in which case it's qualified, and the sale of the lesach is valid? So the Gemara says, well, what's the question? So let's try and bring a proof from our Mishnah. We're in 6 lines from the bottom on 98b, where our Mishnah had said, for ksuva was 100, umachra shava mana v'dinar b'mana, and she sold something that was a value of mana v'dinar, and b'mana, then we're going to say it's nullified, it's disqualified sale. Now, what's the scenario? Ma'ila avdezab and shava mana v'dinar b'mana v'dinar. What is it? Aren't we talking about a case where you sold something that was worth a mana and dinar, and you sold it for a mana v'dinar? And still, we're going to say umay b'mana. And what does it mean? You sold it for a mana? Mana shalah. He sold a mana of her field, meaning to say she had the right to sell a mana because she was an agent. The agent had appointed her to sell a mana, and she went ahead and she sold a mana of a dinar of it, and she sold a mana and dinar of that amount, not just a mana. And so then we're going to say under those circumstances, and I feel he omeres achzir dinar yorshim, even if she says I'm going to return it to the heirs, nevertheless we're going to say bedinar mikarkai, even if she says I'm going to return that the land machabato, it's still disqualified. So we see if he was told to, that if the agent was told to sell a lesach and she sold a core, excuse me, the wholesale is disqualified. The Gemara says no, that's not what the scenario is. No, we're talking about a case where she undervalued the land. She sold the land that was worth excuse me, she sold a land that was worth 101. She sold it for 100. So she sold more of it. She sold it for a price below what it was really worth. That's why the sale is disqualified, but not because she sold double more than what she was allowed to. So the Gemara says it can't be that that's the case. It can't be. It's talking about a case of ozil. We're on top of 99a. Hamid is safe with the ozil. If the concluding, the next case in the Mishnah's case of undervalued land, then Reisha b'delo ozil, then the former clause is where it's a case where it was not undervalued. The Katani Seifa, because what does the next clause say? Then the Reisha was where it was low ozil, because the next clause states, because why would it need to say both cases of undervalued land twice? That wouldn't need to do that. That doesn't make any sense. That it would need to list both cases of undervalued twice. Because the next clause states, let's say her ksuva was 400 and machar was zebamana. And for ksuva was 400 and she sold to one person for 100, the next one for 100, the next one for 100. Well, and to the last one, yafa mana dinar b'mana, and the last one she sold something that was worth 101. She sold it for only 100. That's all she needed to pay up her ksuva. Machra batal. Then we're going to say it's disqualified. Then the last one is disqualified for shakua machrin kayim. So, but the earlier ones, it's a valid sale. So we see from here that where she undervalued the land, it's disqualified. So why would we need to say that case twice? So the earlier case is not a case of ozil. It's a case where she sold more than she was allowed to. The Gemara says no. Reisha was safe but ozil. No, both the former clause and the latter clause is where she was undervalued the land. Excuse me, v'seifa kamash malan. And what's the reason why we need to say it twice? Because in the seifa it's telling us time of the ozil b'diyasmi. The reason why it's disqualified is because she undervalued the land as it relates to the heirs, because she dipped into the heirs' property and she undervalued their property when she sold it. But if it was one of the first 300 pieces of land that she sold it, If she had undervalued it there or was still into her lien on the property, machar kayim, then it'll be a valid sale. The Gemara says, no, Hamad the Reisha Shemas Mina. No, but don't we learn that exact clause from the Reisha that if she undersold it as it undervalued it as it relates to her own property, to her own claims, it's a valid sale. I mean, the Reisha Shamas Mina. We learned this in the Reisha because we have the case in the Reisha. I said Ksuvasa Masayim. Let's say her Ksuva was 200. Machar Shava Mana b'Masayim, and she sold something that was worth 100 for 200, or this is the case that we're talking about. Shava Masayim b'Mana, something 200 for 100. This Gabla Ksuvasa, she undervalued it, but nevertheless a valid sale because it was her money and not somebody else's. So therefore, it's considered like she received the whole Ksuva. The Gemara says, no, the reason why we need to say it twice is Maladatema. You might have thought, Hasan with this Stalko on a high base Gamri. There in the former case, she sold off her complete claim on the estate. So she's completely out. And so therefore, of Ohacha, but in this case, Nigzar Mana Rishon Atamano Achar. We might have thought that if we're going that in the case where she undersold it to the Ozil in one of the first 300, we might have thought it's not going to be a valid sale because then we're going to also validate it in the last case where she actually dipped into the heir's estate. Kamashwan, we don't say that, so that we're saying that even in this case it's a valid sale. In the case where it's connected to part of the ksuba still remaining. So the ikadamri, there's an alternative version of this discussion, alternative conversation. Haloti bayalach, that we're not asking about a case where he said, "Go sell for me a lesach," and the agent went and sold a core. That we don't have a question about. But hechadamra was zil zabin li lisla. But we're talking about a case where what's the question? Where we said, even though, by the way, ikadamri. We didn't answer the question, but they said, but that wasn't our question. Presumably, they don't say if it will be all for sure no good or all for sure good. They don't say that. But anyway, the question is about the Amrei Zil Zabali Lischav Zabali Kuri. He says, go sell for me. We're not talking about a case where he says Zil Zabali Lischav Zabali Kuri. Divide most about the verbs. So Gemara says that's for sure a case where it was Mosif. If he says, go sell for me a lesach, he sold a core, for sure the sale of the lesach is valid. And the other remaining, the second lesach is not valid. But where is it a question? He says, go sell for me a kura. He said, go sell for me a kur. And the agent went and sold half that. Sold only a lesach. What's the law there? Do we say do we say to him, that which is good for you, I did for you? Meaning to say, I sold less, which is good for you because you don't want to sell your property. Now the because if in the end you don't need the money, you're not able to. You wouldn't be able to go back if you had actually sold it. Oh, Dilma, or maybe he says, maybe I don't want a lot of notes that I keep selling property. That's no good for me. So therefore, it's an open question. So that's the question we're discussing. Now he told him to sell a kur, and he went and he sold half of that. Let's try and answer this question from our Mishnah from Me'ilah, where he says, Tashma, Nasan lo dinar shel zahav, where let's say he says to him, give him a gold coin. The amar lo, the gold coin is 6 selah, and he said he gives him a gold coin. He doesn't realize it's temple property, but he's giving him actually temple property. And if he misused temple property, that's called me'ilah. So he gave him a gold coin, and he said, Havi li cholok, and he says, go get for me a cholok, go get for me a shirt. V'halach ve'evi lo b'shalosh cholok. And he went and he brought him. The agent went and he got him a shirt, but he didn't get him the shirt for 6 gold selah. He got him the shirt for 3, and with the other 3, he bought a talis. So the Mishnah Miyua says Shnei Mo, that both the agent and the Balabayas are considered to be the agent and the Balabayas are both considered to be Mi'ila. Both the agent and the Balabayas are considered to be a Mi'ila. So now Iyamr is Bishlama. Now what's the scenario here? If we're saying Shliach Yagavna Osa Shlichusa. So in that case, where he sent him out, he said, buy me a shirt for 6, and he ended up buying a shirt for 3. And still we say that the agent has trespassed. So if you were to say in our case here, we send him out to buy something for a core and he bought it for a lesach, that's B'Shliach Yagavna Osa Shlichuso, Mosif al Dvarav Have, that the Shliach in this case is considered Mosif, and Mishum Hachi Balabayas Mal. That's why the Balabayas is considered to be in violation of Me'ilah here, because the Shliach that is Shlichuso in this case. Eliyavner is Ma'avir al Dvarav here, but if we say that in the case where the Shliach did half of what you told him to do, that it's going to be considered that he's not carrying out the Shlichus, that he's Ma'avir al Dvarav, my mile, then why is this case the Baal Bayis Mo? The Shliach didn't do what he was told to do, so the Baal Bayis should not be in violation of Me'ilah. The Gemara says, no, no. Here what we're referring to is the Isolate Shava Sheish B'Shalosh, where he brought him something that was worth 6. He brought him a shirt that was worth 6. He just got it on sale. He got it for 3. Well, if that's the case, if he did exactly what the agent told him, what the Baal Bayis told him to do, if the agent did exactly what the Baal Bayis told him to do, then Shliach Hamaymo. Then why is the Shliach himself considered to be in violation? If he just did what the agent told him to do, what the Baal Bayis told him to do, we say here that the Shliach ain't Shliach, that the Shliach is not by Me'ilah. We don't follow the principle of Ein Shliach is our Avera. By Me'ilah, we say that the agent is only liable if he deviates. But if he got him exactly what he told him to do by buying him the shirt, then why is the Shliach in violation? The Gemara say the Shliach is in violation because the a talis. He's in violation because he also bought a talis. But the remaining 3, he bought this talis. So therefore, that's why the shliach is in violation. When Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if you're saying that if you buy for half the price, that you're going to be in violation, that the Baal Bayis still violates the law of Me'ilah, Ema Seifa, but the next quote says, Rabbi Yehuda says, that if he bought a cholok for 3 instead of 6, the Baal Bayis was not considered to be in violation. Because he says, you brought me a bad shirt. I wanted a big shirt, and you brought me a bad shirt. Now, so if you're saying that he just got it from at half price, then why is it a bad shirt? Because you're saying he bought something for 6 for 3. So if you're saying you bought him something for half price, but it was the same good quality, then why is he calling it a bad shirt? So the Gemara explains, no, what does Ra mean? It doesn't mean a bad shirt. Ra b'damim. He says, I wanted you to spend the full amount, and you only spent half the amount. If you had spent all 6, you would have brought me a shirt that was worth 12. You didn't carry out what I told you to do. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. The Baal Bayis is not considered to be a Me'ilah there. But the fundamental idea, is like that we were saying here, that he carried out exactly what he told him to do. But it's not a case of Moses or Mavir. He did exactly what he wanted him to do. And I'll prove to you, Dekonami, and I'll prove to you that when it says Ra here, it means Ra b'damim, because the Katani, because we learned in the Tosefta of Me'ilah, Moda Rabbi Yehuda Bekinis, but Rabbi Yehuda would admit in the case of beans, Sheshneemo, that if he bought he spent half the money on beans, that both the Baal Bayis and the Shliach are considered to be in a violation of Me'ilah. Because what's the case? Shakinios Vesel v'kinios bepruta, because the kinios you don't get a better deal if you buy more with it. You get the same amount whether you buy a sell of it or you get a pruta. It's the same. You get the same value. Shma mina. So indeed we see from here that the chilek ra that Rabbi Yehuda was talking about was talking about Ra b'damim. It was not actually a bad shirt, and so therefore that's the proof from it. Because by kinios we're going to say that it doesn't matter. There it's different than the case of the shirt, because kinios get the same amount no matter how much of the kinios we buy. And the Gemara just adds, where are we talking about? If we're talking about a case where they evaluate the kitnios. If you're saying you sell it on the basis of how the kitnios look, then if he gives them a sella, of course it'll be cheaper. So Amar Papa no, but they sell it by the jug. They say each jug is for a pruta. So there, that case is where there's a big difference between the kitnios and the shirt. So now the Gemara says we still have to prove this question. We still haven't answered this question. If we send him out to sell a core and he sells a lesach, is it going to be a considered like he's carrying out his shlichus or not? So Tashma Haisik Kesubos Arameo Zuz. So let's say her ksuba was 400 zuz, and then Machro was Zebimana. He sold each one for 100. But then she sold a Achro and Yafim Mana Vedina Ramana. And the last one, she sold something that was a mana of a dinar. She sold it for 100. So we want to say, so in the earlier ones, it's a valid sale. And in the earlier ones, she went out ostensibly as the agent of the heirs to sell the whole ksuba, but she only sold a portion of it. So isn't that the case of she went out to sell a core and she sold a lesach? And we're still saying it's a valid sale. So doesn't this prove that if you say sell a core and you sell a lesach, it's a valid sale? Gemara says, no, that's a discrete case. That's Tosefta. It's an ukimta. That's where she's selling off a parcel of land that was just 400 sous, but it wasn't one parcel. It was small little pieces. And so therefore, the understanding from the beginning was that she was going to sell a piecemeal. And that's where Rav Shishi said in a different case, in Hachinami with Katini. Here also, we're talking about in this case where it was Katini. So the Gemara says, well, let's talk about a different case. Pshita, it's obvious, and that's how we'll get to this case of Katini, because we want to know basically where is it a case of Katini, where you sold it off piecemeal. Now, we quoted here also that it's relevant for this case, because that's what we said is the Ukimta of our Mishnah, is where she was selling a Katini. And it's obvious, it's obvious in the case where he said, go sell this to one person, but not to two people. It's obvious that under those circumstances, it's obvious in that case that if he sold it to two, it's not valid because he said sell it to one and not to two. So, but let's say he said just sell it to one person, stam, but he doesn't specify if it's to one or two. What's the law there? So Ravuna said under that case, it's they sold it to one and not to two. Rav Chisda, Rav Barafuna, that meaning to say Rav Huna is saying that since the agent sold it to two, it's not valid. Whereas Rav Chisda, Rav Barafuna, Damri Travaya, they said no, saying it's to sell to a person, but he could even sell it to two or to 100. It's all valid. It's all a valid sale because it's all part of the same agency. He wasn't specifically to one person. So the Gemara says, so Ikla Rav Nachman was Surah. Rav Nachman came to Surah. Oligabe Rav Chisda for Rav Barafuna. Rav Chisda, Rav Barafuna went up to visit Rav Nachman. They say, what's the law in case we said sell it to one person and the guy sold it to two people? He says, doesn't matter even to two or to 100. Doesn't matter. It's all good. So the Gemara says, so he said to him, Shliach. He said, what about if the agent makes a mistake in the price? It's still a valid sale. So they say, so he responds. He says to them, I'm not talking about a case where the agent made a mistake. This is not a mistake. So he means to say that if the agent makes a mistake, it's a disqualified sale. Where it says, but don't we have a principle? It was taught that there's no no means if you make a mistake in the price, the sale is nullified by a sixth or more, then the sale is nullified. But don't we have a principle that there's no enough for karkos and Matzia Daf Nun Vav, that there's no enough for karkos? Well, if that's the case, if there's no enough, there's no mistake, price gouging or underselling by real estate, then why was the agent's mistaken sale there disqualified? So the Gemara says, yeah, well, when do we say there's no owner for karkos? That's where the owner made the mistake. But if the agent makes the mistake, then there is a mistake. Because he could say, I sent you to tell me not to make a mistake. What's the problem?
That when you're selling property, you don't always get the the price. You have no price value, but you go to sell it on the market.
Yeah, but there's
might not be the price, especially if you've already sold.
That's part of the reason why there's no enough for karka. The principle of onah doesn't apply to real estate.
It just seems like they're assuming you can always get the price exactly what it's worth.
Or you have to go back. If you tell your real estate agent sell my house for $1 million, the real estate goes and sells it for $750 without first consulting with you, you're going to be pretty upset.
If you say that, it's not
yeah. No, he says sell it for me for this price. Presumably, if he just said sell it, I don't care what price you get it for, then he's obviously not a breach of the contract.
Which you did.
No, that's a different case. That's not this case. This is not a case of the ksuba. No, for the case of the ksuba, if she undervalued it. But we're going to see in the next Mishnah how you evaluate the land. But the case of the ksuba was where she undervalued it. Anyway, Murray first says, how do we know that there's a distinction between a shliach and a baal bayis? Mane tamer the shani ben shliach and baal bayis. I'll tell you how. The Tanan, Homer shluchot seyu to Rome. Say to the agent, go and take truma for me. Torim kedas baal bayis. You take the truma in accordance with the intent of the owner. Let's say you don't know what the true intent of the owner is. Torim bebeinanis. Then you take the truma, the average, which say by truma you could do 140th, 150th, 160th. 150th is the average, 150th of the produce. If he goes up or down by 10% from 40th or 160th, then it's still valid. So there you have to basically do only what the baal bayis wanted or what you thought he would have wanted. But if you go too much, if you're the agent and you go too much, it's disqualified the truma. But by the owner himself, and by the owner himself, if he did even 1/20th, it's a valid truma. So we see from here that we draw a distinction between a mistake made by al-bayis, which is binding, whereas a mistake made by the shliach, which is not binding. So Gemara says, okay, we're still trying to answer this question. If we say sell it to one person, he goes and sells it to 2 or 100, is it valid? Tashma. What about? And we're going to bring a proof from our Mishnah. So in the first case, presumably the woman was acting as the agent of the heirs. She sold it to one. They said go sell it to a person, and she sold it to 1, to 2, to 3, and then to 4. And we're still saying it's a valid sale, at least for the first 3, even though she sold it to multiple people. Doesn't this answer the question? So about that, we said Amar Shisha Grei Davidi B'Katini. No, the Ukim of the Mishnah is we're talking about a small parcel of land, and so therefore it's the small parcel. So clearly, it's meant from the beginning. It's understood from the beginning to sell a piecemeal. And so therefore, it's not an indication in general of an answer to that question. So now we're up to the Mishnah on the bottom of Tzadi Testament. It's Shuma Dayanim. Let's say you have the court makes an evaluation and the court makes a mistake. They went up by a 6 or they went down by a 6. They overvalued it or undervalued it. Machram pato. The sale is disqualified. The court made a mistake. The sale is canceled. Rashbag says Machran Kayim. Rashbag says no, it's a valid sale because Imkei Makoch Bazin Yafa. The court, we have to give authority to the court. If we're going to disqualify the sale because the court made a mistake, then we're going to go back in time and we're going to start looking at all the court proceedings. So what are we saying about the court? Imkei Makoch Bazin Yafa. Can you imagine you go back and say, well, they bought Manhattan for $24 back in the whatever year. I don't know what year they bought it, but they bought Manhattan Island for $24. That's not a good sale. Let's go back and nullify the ruling of the court. You can't do that. You can't go back in time. So that's what Rishbag says. Avram asu igeres bikores binein. But let's say the court did an igeres bikores. Rashi says that's an achraza. They put an ad in the newspaper and they put it up for public scrutiny. And I feel machra shavamana b'masayim or shavammasayim b'mana. Even if they're off by 50% in either direction, Mechran Kaim, the sale is valid. All right, we'll stop the recording here and